All right, greetings and welcome, my friend, once again to another episode here, the live stream Red Delta Project podcast and personal coaching session. Matt Schifferly here, as always, your host. And this is one of the first, or it could be the first episode here in the year 2025. And I'm going to start changing up the format of these a little bit because I'm more interested in utilizing these live streams as opportunities to help you more directly. Usually I come on with some sort of a topic or a thing to discuss. And then I try and steer the conversation more in that general direction. But 2025 for me is going to be all about trying to make Red Delta Project a lot more about helping you get exactly what you want, helping you more directly in assisting you in your endeavors. So we're going to just start to try a little bit of a different format with these live streams here that I host every Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And the opportunity is for me to interact more with you. Now, I've noticed that the streaming platform that I utilize to broadcast these has the opportunity for me to actually have guests come on the show. And this is your opportunity. You can always come on in the comment section and ask me questions, as you always do. Is what do you think about this, or what do you think about that, and stuff. But if you like, just simply reply and put in your comment section that you want to come on as a guest, and then we can have more interaction back and forth in the comments. So that way you can ask me questions, I can ask a follow-up, we can have a conversation about what I can do to help you specifically. And if this starts to get a little more popular, I'm going to probably make it a little bit more of something to apply. You can be a guest on the show, or I can help you out over at reddeltaproject.com or reddeltaproject@gmail.com. You just simply write in and say, hey, I want to come on the show and discuss this or that I'm trying on and stuff. Getting more in depth, ways that I can help you out more personally. And so that's kind of the direction I'm going to steer this sort of thing in. Maybe it'll work, maybe not. Who knows? That's one of the things that is about being creative, about doing these sorts of things. And fitness in general is a lot of times, especially in today's culture, we've got the internet, we've got AI, we've got more and more of this idea out there that our problems should be almost solved for us. Like there's someone out there with a product or a service or a pill or something that's going to solve our problems for us. When the reality is that, especially when it comes to things like getting in shape, managing finances better, relationships, all these sorts of things, it's not going to be something that you can just package up into a neat, orderly little system that you can follow step by step and get led by the hand. Instead, it is a full creative process. Sometimes that means a little bit of trial and error. You may also be able to tell in my voice too, kind of battling the long tail end of a nasty cold. There's a lot of stuff going on, especially out here in Denver. So apologies if I get a little bit raspy as I'm discussing here on the podcast, but come on in, folks. The water's fine, and entertaining your questions. And if you would like to be a guest on the episode and I can help you assess program, assess your whole approach, do you have anything in depth that I can help you with? And to get the ball rolling, I wanted to discuss more on my upcoming program of Beautiful Strength, how to use calisthenics and fitness in general to essentially level up your attractiveness, attractive appeal, look better naked, if you will. Because one of the things that I'm learning as I'm going through the research and understanding, compiling all the information for this new program is just how much a lot of the misdirection in our fitness culture is leading us astray. Because when it comes to looking better naked, there's a lot of things that have led us into not necessarily myths, but just kind of distracting beliefs, if you will, about how we think that the body changes and not necessarily how it really does, but what we can do to have the biggest impact over things. And the first of these myths is the myth of the direct aesthetic change or direct aesthetic augmentation through our habits. To kind of illustrate this, let me give you an example. Years ago, I was at Taekwondo, and one of my fellow students grabbed his belly. He had this kind of a bit of a paunch going on. And he started shaking it. He's like, Matt, what can I do to get rid of this, like this belly that I've got? What exercise gets rid of this? And the answer, that I gave him was nothing. Nothing. There is no exercise that will get rid of that. There is no method that will directly tell your belly to shrink. It's impossible. Now, it doesn't mean that nothing you do won't help it to shrink down. I'm saying it's not direct. This myth of the direct effect is where the myth is. And the direct effect basically says if you do habit X, you're going to get result Y. If you follow this diet, if you do this exercise, you're going to get abs. If you do this, you're going to get that. And this idea is very prevalent in our fitness culture because, like most ideas that we desperately want to believe, it sells well. It's very, very marketable, if you will. And by and large, a lot of the ways that we believe that fitness works in our fitness culture is not based on science or evidence-based. It's based on marketing. It's based on the stuff that sells very well. If an idea takes hold of the public consciousness, then that idea becomes so prevalent, it becomes a belief. And we don't recognize that it's not actually based on anything actually valid, but instead it's just an idea that we just keep thinking, therefore it becomes a belief. And that's exactly what's happened here, is the idea that you can take a particular diet or a particular exercise, habit, or program and directly change how your body looks in a reliable way, which just doesn't happen. It's one of those things that can happen, but not in a direct way. And what I mean by that is it's due to a number of factors, a number of variables, a number of habits, things all coming together as a holistic, synergistic system that can steer you towards a particular result. But there is no exercise that directly makes your core look a certain way. There is no such thing as fat loss exercise. Seriously, there's not a single thing you can ever physically do that will directly tell your body to be leaner. Now, you can, of course, do physical activity, which increases your rate of caloric expenditure. Increasing your rate of caloric expenditure can potentially mean that you burn more calories than you are consuming, potentially, depending on diet, of course, which is a caloric deficit. Being in a caloric deficit means you will decrease body fat. If you start to decrease body fat, will that have an impact on your body fat in your midsection? Probably. But you see how it's a number of pieces that all come together, a number of influences. It's like, well, you've got to have this, and depends on this, which depends on this, which depends on this, which depends on this, which might make this happen, which could happen this, and then you'd get that result. That's how this stuff actually works, which means that, no, it's not worthless to do the exercises. It's not worthless to have the diet improve and stuff. But when we set ourselves up for this idea that there is a direct, if I do this, this will happen. And then when it doesn't work or it doesn't happen, we think it doesn't work. When in fact, it always works. It always works reliably well. It's just we are been misled to believe how these things work, why these things work. Case in point here, we got our first question here. Enigma coming on saying, Matt, I want to increase the size of my abs, not just make them visible. Is it the volume in hundreds plus a good, quote, bulking diet? You're talking about volume of exercises here, Enigma. So case in point, right? So how in the world do we make the abdominals bigger? Well, this is one of the things about the fundamental nature about building up muscle is that the muscles that are going to have the biggest difference in their aesthetic augmentation are the muscles that are just simply thicker muscle bellies to begin with. And the abs just aren't that. They don't have, your rectus abdominis is actually a relatively thin muscle. It's a fairly thin sheath of muscle that just covers the front of your midsection there. And because it's not a very thick or big muscle, chances are very good it's never going to get all that big or, quote, thick. Now, that's completely different from the thickness of your core as a whole, because there's a lot of muscles that comprise of your midsection. Your lats, in particular, are one of them. Then you've got your TVA, and you've got your obliques, your internal obliques, your external obliques, and so on. So if by talking about the size of your midsection, then yes, that's more possible because you're talking about more muscle. But the abdominals themselves, again, they're just relatively a small muscle, which means that they're just going to have a hell of a time getting any kind of size because you don't have much to work with, just physiologically. But it doesn't mean it's impossible. Now, again, the myth of if you do X, you get result Y. So he's talking about volume, hundreds of repetitions and stuff like that. So there was this idea that certain muscles, depending on muscle fiber composition, type 1, type 2, type 2A, type 2B fibers and stuff, are going to respond better to either higher volume or lower volume kind of things. But this idea is largely gone by the wayside. It's one of those myths that's just kind of like, yeah, there might have been a little something to it, but by and large, in practical application, it doesn't really pan out. So building up the abdominals is like building up any other muscle group. You want to subject it to a good amount of intensity and enough volume to produce a significant amount of fatigue in the muscle to stimulate hypertrophy. Now, a lot of people have a lot of trouble doing that in the abdominals for several reasons. The first of which is that they just have poor tension control in the abs to begin with. And it doesn't matter what program you do, what exercises you do, if you have trouble engaging your abs, you're just not going to get much stimulus because you just have trouble engaging your abs. Excuse me. So if you have trouble engaging your abdominals, then that's going to hold you back. So playing around with isometric exercises can help you a lot with that. The other thing that you can play around with is exercises of a much, much, much higher intensity. I still subscribe to the good old-fashioned idea with abdominal training of if I can do 15 to 20 repetitions of an exercise, that's my upper limit. If I can do more than 20 reps of something, too easy. I need a lot more intensity. I need a lot more tension in the muscle. So people who are like, oh, I do hundreds of this and hundreds of that, it's usually not the most beneficial way. Now, can it work? Yes. But just because it can work doesn't mean it's the best way to go about it. You can get rich playing the lottery, but I'm not going to recommend playing the lottery as a sound financial advice. So it's the same thing with, oh, well, this one guy built huge, thick abdominals and he does 5,000 sit-ups every day. Yeah, so meaningless, completely meaningless anecdotal information because by and large, the vast majority of people who do that don't. So do you want to place your bets on a method that worked for one person out of 1,000? Or do you want to place your bets on something that works for the majority of the people the majority of the time? And so you want to utilize exercises that are high intensity and allow you to work a muscle to a very high degree of fatigue. So that's why I'm always more about stretch outs on gymnastic strings or ab wheels, same exercise basically, or utilizing either weighted or really difficult leg raise, sit-up kind of techniques. So that way you're working your muscle very hard for like 10 reps, 12 repetitions, so on. So utilize intensity and then whatever volume you need to use on a case-by-case basis in order to sufficiently burn out the muscle would be the way to go there, Enigma. Because as I was saying earlier, there's no direct cause and effect between what we do and how we look. And that message is out there a lot in our fitness culture. It's very prevalent, but not because it has any validity. It's because it sells well. It sells programs, it sells supplements, it sells subscriptions, it sells memberships, it gets likes on social media, it gets shares and subscribers on YouTube and stuff. But it's not valid because if it was, that's what we would do. We would have figured it out. Oh, if we do this habit, we do this exercise, then we reliably get this result. But that's been shown not to be the case. For every one person that tries a particular method and finds success, there are countless others who don't. So how can we say that any method or any exercise or any approach is a direct, reliable cause and effect relationship with that? And the answer is it's not. Doesn't mean you can't do it, but we have to give up on this idea of there being a direct correlation, direct cause and effect in order to break free and be able to recognize what does work. Again, apologies for my voice, guys. I was coaching a lot today, so I was hoping my voice would hold up a little bit better. I'll try and speak a little softer. Maybe that's going to be a little bit easier for me. Restless Gypsy coming on. Say, Matt, how often, say per week, would you recommend hitting a body part? And then there's another volume question saying how many sets per workout for each muscle group. So I've never given any set amount of volume. Okay. It's kind of like, how many bites should you take to finish off a steak? Okay. How many sips of a beverage should you take to finish off a glass of tea, right? It's the old, how many licks does it take to get to the Tootsie Roll Center and Tootsie Pop? And there's a reason why the world may never know. It's because there is no answer. There is no definitive answer. There are answers that are good, that'll get you in the ballpark. Usually when it comes to hitting a muscle group per week, 2 to 3 is a good ballpark. That'll work for a lot of people a lot of the time. 2 to 3 times a week, 3 to 4 sets. Again, ballpark number. General get you in the vicinity kind of idea. But if we really want to get dialed in on what you need, we don't base things off of volume. We don't base things off of a particular static number. Because if I said, okay, have 6 sips of this tea, what are the chances that's going to drain it? What if I drain it in 5? Do I still pretend to take another sip, right? We like knowing these numbers because, again, it gives this idea that there's a direct cause and effect out there. We're told that if we want to get the result we want, we need to do the right number of sets, as if it's really that precise, as if it's like, well, you better do 3. I still get emails from people saying, I did 3 sets, but I decided on a whim to do 4. Am I overtraining? Is that too much? It's like, seriously, like it's going to actually matter. Like it's going to make any real difference, right? It's not about the volume. It's not about how many times you work out per week. It's not about your sets or your reps. It's about how well you can achieve a fundamental objective. And when you're trying to go after, particularly, I'm guessing you're trying to build muscle here, we're trying to burn out the muscle. Now, there's many different variables that come into play for how much volume you need to do in order to do that. There's personal variables, intensity, technique, training history, time, motivation. How many sips of this tea would it take for me to drain a cup? Depends on the tea, depends on how hot it is, depends on the size of the sip, depends on how big the cup is, depends on how long the sip is. There's so many variables that can change your numbers one way or the other, which is why it's very hard to pick any particular number and say, that's the correct answer. So that's why I'm always more about an objective-based approach. When you say, this is your objective, do whatever you need to hit that objective. You're trying to challenge your muscular work capacity, trying to burn out your muscle. Well, I can do that twice a week, but 3 times a week is getting kind of sketchy. Okay, there's your answer. Well, I can actually do it 5 times a week. Okay, there's your answer. Well, I can adequately fatigue my muscle in 2 to 3 sets. There's your answer. Well, sometimes for whatever reason, I need 6 to 7 sets. There's your answer there. It's not about the numbers. It's not about the sets and the reps. It's about objectives. And so work your muscle as much as you want, as much as you can. Burn it out, then let it recover. Burn it out, let it recover. Probably going to be 2 to 3 times a week. But if you're like, I could do it 4 times a week, great. We're talking about abdominals. Maybe they recover faster. So you could do it more often. Fantastic. Oh, but my legs, they get destroyed. And then my legs aren't up for it again for at least 6 days. Okay? Then maybe once a week. When you know your objective, then you can base all of your decisions off of that. Because when we don't have an objective, we become like an archer who's lacking a target. And then you go after that old adage of like, how do you become the world's best archer? Just blindly shoot an arrow and then call whatever the arrow hits the target, right? That usually is the way we mostly do fitness these days, is that we're just shooting arrows randomly into the sky, hoping we hit something worthwhile. That's not a good way to go about things because it's very wasteful for your time and energy. So when you have a target and I say, okay, I need you to hit a bullseye on that target, how many arrows should I shoot? What do you mean, how many arrows do you shoot? Shoot as many as it takes. It could hit it in one shot. It could be 1,000 shots. I don't care how many arrows you shoot. I don't care how many sets you do. I don't care how many exercises you do. This is your target. That's your objective. Do whatever you need to do that. Well, I think I can do that if I do it this way. Great, go for it. Now you've got something to base your choices off of. Now you've got something that you can assess the validity of everything off of because you know your objectives. And having an objective-based approach, like my grind style calisthenics program, micro workouts, Be Fit, Live Free, all those books that I've written are all about those objectives because it's not about the plan you're on. It's not about, how many carbs you eat or anything like that. It's about hitting that fundamental objective. And that's where your success comes from. And when it comes to aesthetic augmentation, looking your best naked, you're not going to have that fulfilled with any particular diet or exercise, any particular approach. It's so because of that, we endlessly run around just saying, what if I did 5 sets? What if I did 3 sets? What if I worked a muscle group once a week? What if I did it 3 times a week? What if I had a high protein breakfast, but then a high carb lunch? But what if I flipped it around and had higher carb in the breakfast and then more protein at lunch and stuff? We're just randomly running around without any purpose or direction. And whatever success we have is blind luck. So once again, we're down to playing the lottery, trying to become successful. So when we are going after aesthetic augmentation, another big myth that's out there is this idea of how do we change the body? Right? There's a lot of marketing messages in our fitness culture that tell us we can bulk and shrink and tone and tighten and elongate and stretch and just have all these different ways we can mold and shape the body. And almost all of it is just marketing mumbo jumbo sales pitch speak. It has almost no validity in real life. That's because when it comes down to trying to change your physique, you've just got burn the fat, build the muscle. That's it. It doesn't matter what kind of physique you're trying to build. It doesn't really matter what kind of aesthetic augmentations. It's I want to build this and shrink this and make this smaller, make that bigger and stuff. Yeah. Burn the fat, build the muscle. Burn the fat, build the muscle. It's all the same. Doesn't matter if you're trying to become a champion bodybuilder or if you just want to quote, tone up or whatever. It's all the same thing. The only difference is the degree. So all of these ideas of this program is about tone and this program is about size and this program is about shrinking and this program is about, making your muscles longer. I once heard someone say, I was oh yeah, I love this strength training program because it makes my muscles longer. Well, that's easy. Just there, my bicep's longer. If I straighten my arm, my bicep gets longer. But it's all that marketing mumbo jumbo. It tries to convince you that there's something special about that program. And there isn't. There really isn't. When we're trying to change how our body looks, we're trying to get leaner, we're trying to build up our muscles. It's that simple. That's the only 2 variables we got. That's fat and muscle. And we want to build the muscle. We want to decrease body fat. And that's how we can change how our body looks in a more favorable way. And so if we give into a lot of these ideas that there's, different ways we can change the body around, then we usually end up just going down rabbit holes that are distraction from what we really need to be doing. Because that is very prevalent in our fitness culture with a lot of these marketing messages, is they distract us from doing the things that are actually important. You want to lose body fat? Got to be in a caloric deficit. Don't get too distracted with, how many exact protein grams of protein do I need for my age and my gender and my geosynchronous precision, the hemisphere I live in and all these sorts of things. A lot of that stuff, again, is marketing mumbo jumbo, trying to get you to sell more or buy more into a program, thinking that the program is special. And it's not. It's like calisthenics. I've written all those books on calisthenics training. There's nothing special about calisthenics. It's just another way to put resistance against a muscle so you can challenge your muscular work capacity. Same as everything else. There's nothing special about it. But it's fun. I do it because I like the efficiency. I like the independence. I like the way it makes me feel. But as far as building muscle, no, there's nothing special to it. Working my biceps against resistance with suspension bicep curls has no advantage or disadvantage over dumbbell bicep curls. It's the same thing. It's just, what do you like kind of idea. And when we don't get distracted by the marketing mumbo jumbo, we can stay more focused on what's actually most important. Again, apologies for my voice here, folks. It's fading faster than I thought it would. Joseph, my man, coming on. Say, Matt, if I got hard and intense, how many more calories would someone burn? I would think it is not doable. How many do you think someone would burn? Very good question. Because remember, when you are physically active, a lot of mumbo jumbo out there, again, marketing people, not validity, marketing is telling you you're burning fat or this is going to cause fat loss. It's all marketing mumbo jumbo. It's not true. When we are physically active, all we're doing is we're taking the rate at which we burn fat and calories and we're speeding it up. There's only 3 things you can do to do that. The first of which is just use more muscle mass. This is why you're never going to have, wrist curls as a fat loss strategy. It doesn't work enough muscle, but full body workouts or things that use the big muscles in the body, like your legs, are going to be more effective because it's just working more muscle. The second of which is intensity, as my man Joseph is pointing out. Okay, so if you're walking, you're burning calories at a certain rate of speed. But if you go and you start jogging, you're increasing that rate. And then you start running and you increase it further. And then you sprint and you increase it further. And so that's what you're doing when you're adding intensity. And then the third variable, of course, is just simply time. The more you do, the longer you do it, the more you burn. It's that simple. Excuse me. So when you are going at a higher intensity, you are burning at a faster rate. Now, years ago, I don't know if they're still using this metric, but they used to call them METs. I think it was like metabolic energy. God, I can't even remember the acronym. It's been so long. But a lot of people used to get obsessed over their METs. Because if you're walking, theoretically, if you're laying and sitting, that's 1 MET. You're burning calories at 1 MET or 1 MEP. And MEP is different. Sorry, got distracted there. MET. So then if you get up and start walking, that's like 1.5 METs. And then running, it's 2 METs. So a lot of times people would base their workouts on, 3 METs, because theoretically you're burning 3 times as many calories as if you were lying down. But with intensity, your energy expenditure drastically increases. But intensity also is something you can't do for very long. So you're limited by time. Statistically, if you really wanted to look at how much you're burning, try doing a very, 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 very heavy deadlift. That's going to burn far more calories than any amount of cardio per unit of time, though. So how long does that 1 rep take you? Let's say you spend 30 whole seconds deadlifting. Okay, so you're very high intensity, awesome. But it's only 30 seconds. It's only 30 seconds of actual activity. So always remember, folks, that yes, intensity is important, but the biggest influence on your calorie expenditure by far is time. And no matter how intense you work, to answer your question, Joseph, there's just no way you can burn a very high, significant amount of calories with high intensity stuff when you don't do it for a very long period of time. There's just no way. The time just isn't there. And it usually takes more time than we think. Back in the day, I was a fat loss coach for a competition. And I told my clients, I said, in order for your physical activity to have a real meaningful influence on your caloric balance, I want you being physically active a minimum of 3 hours a day. Minimum of 3 hours a day. I don't care what you're doing. You mow the lawn, push the mower, walk the dog, play basketball, go for a hike, work out, do anything. But a minimum of 3 hours. Why? Because I knew we were trying to burn a lot of calories. And at the end of the day, if you want to burn a lot of calories, just gotta spend a lot of time. You can have good intensity, absolutely. But I'm sure as hell not going to base my ability to burn a lot of significant amount of calories on very high intensity activity, especially if I can't do it for a very long period of time. Minimum of an hour. Minimum of an hour. So to answer your question there, Joseph, kind of roundabout way, is you'll increase your caloric expenditure by going with higher intensity, but not in a very influential, significant way. So if you want to be like, I want to burn a lot more calories, be active for a much longer period of time, doing anything. James Lucas saying, I'd like to know if you have any favorite exercises or techniques for movements most people neglect or which are difficult to train. Yeah, sissy squat for particularly. I love the sissy squat. It's got to be, I think, one of the most effective quadriceps exercises, bar none. Bar none. It's so direct on the quads. It works the quads through a huge range of motion. It's extremely effective. It's easy to dial in. Couple technical details, and you've got it. It's not a hard thing to figure out. As long as your glutes are engaged, you got the total leg activation going on. It's not hard. It's one of the simplest, easiest, most direct and effective ways to build up your quads. So yeah, that'd be sissy squats. Zero, come in, Matt. What's the correct weight distribution on feet while doing lunges and squats? Well, squats are 50-50 if you're talking bilateral exercise. But lunges, as much on the front leg as you possibly can. As much as you possibly can. The more on the front leg you can. Because you want to think of the lunge as basically an alternating single leg squat with back leg assist. Now, some exercises put a little bit more weight on the back foot, kind of like a split squat. So as you squat down, your weight shifts to the front leg. Then as you stand up, you go back to 50-50. That's why it's a good introductory exercise for people who are looking to learn lunges and stuff. But yeah, basically squats, 50-50, lunges, as much on the front leg as you possibly can. Kind of a good little test that I like to give people is get down in the bottom of a lunge position and then pick your back foot up off the floor. Ideally, your body shouldn't move very much. If you're in a lunge position, deep lunge, you can pick your back foot up off the floor just for a second. You shouldn't have like a whole lot of rocking back and forth going on. Manuel's asking about rest days. Do you suggest taking any, and if so, how much? Again, depends on 20 different variables that are different for everybody. That's why I always say rest is needed. Rest is needed. Rest is needed between sets. Rest is needed between workouts. I'm usually, it's kind of like cheat meals, cheat days and stuff like that. A lot of people like the structure. A lot of people like a structured approach where they're told to do everything exactly just so every day. I'm not one of them. Don't give me structure. I can't stand to follow people's workout programs. I've done it several times throughout my career, and I've always hated it because I don't like being told what to do, specifically, especially by someone who doesn't know me. So rest days are good for that individual. But for me, I'm like, rest if you need it. As you can hear in my voice, like I've not been feeling my best these days. So a couple days ago, right, New Year's Day, I literally got up and I sat in front of the TV all day and I didn't do a thing. I didn't do anything. I just watched football all day and then went home, went to bed. So I guess that was a rest day. But I did it because I needed the rest. My kind of approach to things is rest if you need to. If you don't need to rest, don't worry about it. Stay active. It's like we need permission to rest and permission to be active. And instead, I take the approach of be active if you can, do what you can with what you have. And if you want to take rest, if you want to be taking rest for recovery, then do so. If you're doing better with a structured approach, like I feel better if I do that on a Sunday, go for it. But you don't need rest days if you don't want them. If you can recover fine in between, go for it. It wasn't too long ago that human beings couldn't have a rest day. We had to be physically active to do everything. We had to be active to get food. We had to be active to build shelter. We had to be active to socialize. Unless the person you wanted to socialize with was sitting next to you or within talking distance, you had to physically move to get to them. So, we're not built to have a full rest day where we're just lounging on the couch, doing nothing. But if you're like, okay, I need to rest a little bit from, hard leg workout, doesn't mean I can't go out for a walk. Always remember that, the idea of rest is usually meaning no exercise, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to abstain from all physical activity as well. But rest is needed. Usually that's more applicable. I'll rest if I need the rest. If my body can do better with the rest, then I use the rest because it can use a rest. But if I don't need the rest and I feel like I'm good to go, then I go. It's that simple. Larry, it's good to see you. Saying is hanging from a bar, an isometric, and as a wall squat, a suitable quad isometric. If you're not engaging arms with straps to rest the upper body. Yeah, those are isometrics, and yeah, it's suitable. But make sure you drive your heels into the floor there with that wall seat, Larry, and your tailbone into the wall. Don't feel like you've got to you're sitting on the wall going like, all right, when am I done? Kind of thing. Make those quads work. Light them up. Drive those heels into the floor as hard as you possibly can. Make sure that you're using something with good traction. Stocking feet on a hardwood floor is probably going to slip out on you. But that's great for the quads. Try doing it in a deep squat too. Get down on the wall. Like, don't go with your thighs parallel. Get down below parallel. You'll find your quads are going to work extremely hard with that. Mole, hope I'm pronouncing that right, saying the pauses between repetitions could be during the time when breathing is steady. My definition of a pause, correct. Yeah, you pause, at the top and the bottom. Oh, sets. Sorry, now I'm getting confused. You added that. It's the sets between, pauses between sets. I got you. To catch your breath and everything. Yes. Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. So remember, rest is dependent upon, like so many things. It depends on how far you push into the red zone. Depends on your range of motion. Depends on the intensity. Depends on your speed. Depends on your conditioning. Depends on what muscles you're working. Depends on how much muscle you're working. Depends on your supersets. Depends on how warmed up you are. Depends on ambient temperature. Depends on 100 different things. So that's why I say rest is needed. Rest, I always tell people, you want to rest enough so you can attack the next set with a good amount of focus and intensity. So if you need more rest to make that happen, do so. But if you can go. Don't feel like you've got to hold yourself back. So just to put a bow on the idea of, the marketing messages that are out there that convince us about how fitness works and stuff. The direct effect for aesthetic augmentation is one of them. The terms that I was talking about earlier, where we've got, descriptive ideas of build, bulk, shrimp, tone, tighten, all these sorts of things, don't really mean anything. It's just, are we getting leaner and our muscles getting bigger? That's all that we're working with. And then the last one that we really want to drive into is just this idea of like, there's this one particular approach that's going to work best for you. I call this sometimes the fairy tale ending. Like, oh, I want to find my one true approach and ride off into the sunset. and stuff, and nothing else is going to work. The fact of the matter is most things work great. You can do 100 different diets. You can do plenty of different workout programs. Your ability to get the result doesn't depend on the diet or the workout program in most cases. It depends on how well you're achieving that fundamental objective. And most any type of even half-assed diet and exercise habits are going to be able to help you do that to at least some degree. So it just boils down to, well, what do you think is best for you? What do you think is going to make it the easiest possible for you to achieve that fundamental objective of challenging your muscular work capacity to stimulate hypertrophy, to eat less or slow down your caloric intake or increase your caloric expenditure so you can get in a caloric deficit and burn some body fat off? You can use a number of approaches, believing that there's one particular way that's going to be best usually leads us more into distractions and just running around looking for what's that one thing. Because not only are we looking for just one thing that's going to potentially work, but the more you have a narrow approach, the more limited your approach is going to be anyway. So if you're like, I'm going to lose weight through intermittent fasting, okay, great. Can you go in a caloric deficit with that? Yes. But that's such a narrow, limited approach that you're holding yourself back because you're only using that one thing. You can utilize many different approaches at the same time. If I wanted to build muscle and my whole approach was, being able to lift as much weight as possible, well, there's a lot of other variables that come into challenging my muscular work capacity. So if all I'm doing is how much weight can I lift or how many push-ups can I do, it doesn't matter how good I get at those. I'm always going to be severely, severely limited because you're focusing on one influential variable while ignoring countless others. It's like a sports team saying, I want this one player to be the best in the league, and the rest of the players don't matter. I don't care if they're the worst. So that one player is going to carry the team on its back. No, you're going to have limited success with that approach. So when we go after what's the approach, what's the diet or the exercise that's going to directly impact how my body looks, chances are no matter what you pick, it's going to be extremely limited, which means you're going to have to work twice as hard for a fraction of the results. So instead of trying to look for that one thing, instead of having that and saying, I just want to use a number of things to achieve this fundamental objective of a caloric deficit so I can lose body fat, or challenging my muscular work capacity so that I can build some muscle, that's going to be far more effective and a lot easier. Because remember, this whole fitness thing, it only works if it gets easier. And that way you can get better results while maintaining them as well. Last couple of questions before I sign off here, folks. Larry's following up saying it's better to combine isometric workouts. Calisthenics workouts are better to do it separately. Probably doesn't matter too much either way there, Larry. I say if you find yourself gravitating towards one, make that your focus and supplement with the other. And you can do it separately or together. Do both. Do it separate, do it together. Remember that the information on what's going to work best for you is going to come from your experience anyway. So try both, and you may feel like, oh, wow, I do them together, and that feels amazing. That's incredible. There's your answer, my friend. Ronald's coming on a couple of questions here. Excuse me. Saying I've been having a problem doing more than 50 push-ups in the workout sessions. Seems like I haven't been able to push further than that. Focus more on exercise for longevity. I do full push-ups and not the half push-ups that I see many are doing. Yeah, I would say that's a good sign there, Ronald. I'd say that's a good sign that you're focusing on good intensity, that your number is relatively low. Let's get the number even lower. Let's do some harder push-ups. Let's do some progressive techniques that make it even harder for you. Something like closer push-ups, potentially. Archer style push-ups, keeping the hand under your chest versus kind of out to the side. Let's make it hard. I don't like high numbers. I like intensity in my workouts.
I go after intensity over volume because I like to build strength rather than just endurance. So, to answer your question, like, I don't, if you're doing 50 reps in a workout, that's the upper level of where I'd be at. By and large, again, speaking of generalizations, most people hit that sweet spot of cost to benefit ratio when the repetitions of a particular exercise they're doing are somewhere like in the mid 20s to lower 30s. You find a lot of the most common strength and hypertrophy programs land you in that general ballpark. Things like 5x5, 3 sets of 10, 4 sets of 6, all these sorts of programs that seem to just stick around and people have great success on them. They all get around that 25 to 30 repetition range ish. So I would say, you know, you could certainly, I think you're very smart because you could certainly do more reps, but it means doing shorter repetitions, doing easier push-ups, in other words. So if you're working with a good amount of intensity, then yeah, you shouldn't be able to do more than 50 reps. If your intensity level is high, 50 should be about the limit at what you're working at, which is a good thing. And that's why I think you're doing great. I think maybe even work with a little bit more intensity. Drop that number down a bit. Last question here before my voice just totally goes out. Say, Matt, what is your opinion of L-sit pull-ups? Only kind I can do indoors during the winter, but I don't feel as much activation in my back as regular pull-ups. Yeah. So remember, folks, when you're adding some sort of a challenging variable to your training, that variable may be the limiting factor in your ability to do the exercise. So if you're doing L-sit pull-ups and you're like, well, I'm doing pull-ups, but my abs are the weak link, my hip flexors are the weak link or whatever, then yeah, it's not going to be quite as effective for the stimulus through challenging your muscular capacity in your back and biceps and your grip and so on, because you've got something else that's a limiting weakness. So it's fine. It's great. It's not a limit, but maybe also I'm assuming you have to do those because you can't get a full hang. Try doing pull-ups off your knees or kneel down. So sit on your heels, when you're on the bar and pull yourself up with your knees tucked, kind of like you're kneeling on the floor. Might be a little bit more direct for your back and biceps. All right, folks, I am going to call it a day. Get some cough medicine for my throat and everything. Sorry for coming on and not being the most melodious sound of my voice here, but thank you everybody for coming on in. And again, I'm going to go with a bit of a different format here for some of these techniques because if no, that didn't work there. There's some way that I can bring someone on as a guest for these, so I want to find a way to invite you onto the actual show and I can have direct one-on-one conversations with you with these podcasts. I think it'd be a fun thing that we could do, and I can help you more in addressing some of these things that you want instead of these just one-off little comments and sessions. Basically a free personal coaching session that I can offer you. But stay tuned for how I figure out how to make that happen. But otherwise, thank you very much. I will talk to you folks next week. Don't forget, books, videos, resources are all available at reddeltaproject.com. Link is down below in the description if you want to check those out. Remember that purchasing equipment and books from the website does help to support Red Delta Project, which is greatly appreciated. So I'll talk to you guys next time. Till then, be fit and live free.